Ronaldo really does come into play on the number 21 machine, you would expect that he's going to have that speed and consistency to be able to give himself the chance of that podium spot as well.
Ronaldo certainly did have the pace in the Superpole session, just unlucky to lose his fastest lap. Started down the order but fought his way through for a place on the second row of the grid this afternoon. This then is your pole sitter, Alvaro Bautista. He's done the double thus far. He's already done the hat-trick in Australia, the Netherlands, the Catalonia round, the Emilia-Romagna round. He hasn't been able to do all 3 race victories in a single weekend since then. That's what he's targeting here to give himself a shot at the title.
Yeah, Alvaro's not stressed on the grid there, so he knows that this is the opportunity to win the championship, and it's just a case of trying to do what you can. All he'll be focused on is winning the race. Whatever happens for Toprak happens. He's not going to be too bothered about that.
24 victories for Ducati this season, 23 of them provided by Alvaro Bautista. Ducati matching their record for a number of wins in a single campaign from 20 years ago. Toprak Razgatlioglu lines up alongside Alvaro Bautista. 2 second places for him. That's all too often been the story, hasn't it? Hasn't been a race winner since the Superpole race in Magny-Cours. It's drop points for Alvaro Bautista that have kept this mathematical hope alive.
Yeah, and for a Toprak, it is just a mathematical hope at this stage, but that's not going to be his concern. His concern is trying to win this race, fight all the way through and see what happens. Yesterday, he was pretty strong, but just didn't quite have the step he needed. Let's see if they've been able to make that progress.
Andrea Locatelli completes the front row of the grid. Locatelli 4th in the championship standings, back on the podium earlier on today for the first time since the Superpole race at the Italian round. Hasn't had a feature-length podium since race 2 in Assen. That's a long old wait, particularly considering he was 3rd in race 2 in Australia, 3rd in race 1 in Indonesia, 3rd in race 2 in Assen. The longer races haven't necessarily worked to his strength since then.
No, it hasn't been the consistent season for Locatelli that he would have wanted in terms of being right there in the fight with Razgatlioglu, giving himself the chance of podiums. But he's 4th in the World Championship for a good reason. He's finished 4th so often this season. He's always up there. And for Locke this weekend, he needs to make sure he's just in that position to be able to come away with a podium.
I think it's fair to say the reality is the reason Locatelli has found himself with all those regular 4th positions is that Jonathan Rea's come back. First few rounds of the season, Rea was way behind where we're used to seeing him. But him becoming a more regular podium finisher locks out those top 3 spots more often than not.
Yeah, exactly. That's the story for so many riders in the field, where they've been really good this season, but they don't have the trophies to show for it.
Bautista, Razgatlioglu and Locatelli, your podium trio from the Superpole race, are the top 3 on the grid for race 2 this afternoon. Second row of the grid, positions 4 to 6 this morning. Remy Gardner, Iker Lecuona and Michael Ruben Rinaldi. Gardner with a very strong performance this weekend so far. It was already a decent Superpole for him with P9. 6th in race 1, 4th in the Superpole race, and he is well placed now to potentially go even better.
Yeah, it's been a really good weekend for Remy, and good step being made by him again. And what's key for Gardner and for so many riders is, can you qualify well? He's been able to qualify well this weekend, which gives him the footing in each of the races.
Big points available to him, and obviously that's important news for GRT as their quest for top independent team continues in 2023. Alongside Gardner here is Iker Lecuona. It's actually been a surprisingly strong weekend for Honda, who almost wrote off their own chances. They did such a good job in Aragon last time out. When we questioned whether they would continue that over into Portimao, they said this circuit didn't necessarily favour them in the same way, but they've gone well, particularly in the hands of Iker Lecuona thus far.
Fine line between underplaying and ruling themselves out, and Honda certainly have underplayed what their goals were for this weekend.
8th and 5th, the 2 race results for Iker Lecuona. The shorter race going well for him, obviously with the crash for Rea and Lowe's playing a part there. Michael Ruben Rinaldi completes the second row of the grid. Mr. Unlucky, retirement from race 1 for Rinaldi. 6th place in the Superpole race, so brings himself back into contention after that underwhelming Superpole effort in the end.
Yeah, 4 races left on the Ducati for Rinaldi, and he'll be out there trying to make sure that he's able to get himself into the podium again in this one. He is the wild card to be able to settle the championship today.
That's the front 2 rows of the grid, an opportunity to head back down to it with Dave Goddard.
Yes, I'm here with the man of the moment, Alvaro Bautista. Alvaro, this could be the race where that 2nd consecutive title is sealed. Tell us your thoughts going into this one.
Well, right now I'm thinking to have the same feeling I had this morning with the bike, because I enjoyed a lot. The feeling was amazing, no? For sure now the conditions are different, so let's see how is the track and also the wind, no? Try to adapt the situation. That's all, nothing special, just try to do my best and enjoy the race, and that's all.
Great stuff. Good luck, Alvaro.
Thank you.
Alvaro Bautista has been able to take it race by race because he is in control, but over the context of the four most recent rounds, there have been points losses to Toprak.
Yeah, there has, and for Bautista, it hasn't been the plain sailing season that he would have hoped for, even if he's always led the championship. It's one of those situations now. We'll wait and see what happens to get across the line.
93 points up at the halfway mark, 98 points, the peak of that advantage for Alvaro Bautista. It's down to 55. Row number 3, Michael van der Mark, Garrett Gerloff and Xavi Vierge. What a brilliant weekend it's been for van der Mark, the best certainly since his comeback from Czech round onwards. 2 7th places, but a combative 7th place in race 1 yesterday.
Yeah, and it is one of those situations for van der Mark. We're seeing that step forward. It's been really good to see as he's gotten fitter and fitter and given himself the chance to be able to show what he can do again.
Yeah, van der Mark coming back from quite dramatic injuries and still carrying a limp as well after those 4 missed rounds, crashing race 2 of the Dutch round, round number 3 of this campaign. But the 30-year-old will head optimistic into next season, that is for sure, on the basis of what he's showing here. Some of the kind of form that we saw from him, particularly in Indonesia, before that injury for van der Mark. This is Garrett Gerloff next to the BMWs, directly alongside him. Excellent performance from Gerloff in race 1 yesterday afternoon with that surprise P4. I say surprise, but actually some validation of the progress that we've seen from him in the last 3 rounds. Had a great weekend in Manicure with 2 top 5s as well.
Still struggling a little bit to get the bike stopped in the upright braking zones, but for Gerloff everywhere else around here, the bike really is working well, and that's where we were able to see yesterday have such a good result. In the Superpole race hasn't always been his biggest strength, but he's been able to give himself that 3rd row of the grid spot.
It has been a strength by contrast for Xavi Vierge. 7th time this season that he's finished in the top 9, moved himself up from 14th position on the grid after Superpole and up into 9th place, and after a 10th place yesterday afternoon from 14th, if he makes further gains here, it will be a big haul of points for Vierge.
Yeah, and for Xavi, he's been able to outscore his teammate by 12 points so far this season, and he's done a really good job. You have to say fair play to Xavi for the step he's made this season.
Not since the reverse grid format have we been accustomed to seeing Jonathan Rea this far back down the order. It is 10th position on this occasion, and obviously that's as a result of his pole position yesterday morning. He is the top performer of those who didn't make the top 9 in the Superpole race. A turn 5 spill for Rea.
Yeah, he always had a lot of experience and success from that 10th on the grid in the reverse order days, but for Jonathan, that was when he had a bike advantage. Let's see what he can do now where he's having to come through on everyone else.
I don't think he's become any less forceful or less aggressive with the overtaking manoeuvres, but there will be a ceiling, and those lead riders will more than likely break away in the early laps, so Rea needs to make swift progress here. Alongside him will be Danilo Petrucci, famously likes to turn up fairly last minute onto the grid, so we skip him to see Philip Oertel here in P12. Oertel with an 11th place finish in race 1, just missed out on those top 9. He was 10th in the Superpole race this morning. That certainly compromises him slightly for race 2, but none of those independent Ducatis have done particularly well this weekend so far. Oertel 11th and 10th, Danilo Petrucci 12th in race 1, only 15th in the Superpole race earlier on today. Barney Ducati need to pull something out of the bag to help Petrucci get back into contention.
Has been a really tough weekend for Petrucci. He's not really been able to make the step I think everyone would have expected. This was a weekend where maybe he's not really been able to get the results that he would have wanted, but Aragon last weekend was a weekend where it all went wrong for him. So that's 2 weekends in a row now where it's been tough sledding really for Petrucci, despite having probably a lot more performance and potential than what the results have shown these last 2 weekends.
Yes, there was a lot of speed in Aragon, but misfortune, as you touched on there, with that crash in Superpole, had to come from the back of the grid. Managed to still fight his way through into 5th in race 1, but the weekend was scoreless from there. So that's your 4th row, Rea, Petrucci and Oertel. This is row number 5, Scott Redding, Axel Bassani and Dominique Egerton. None of these riders have been in the top 10 in either of the 2 races thus far. Scott Redding was 15th in race 1, just a single championship point, and could only take 13th earlier on today. He starts from that same grid slot here. So while the other BMWs are not going well, Redding can afford to be further down the order without anyone batting an eyelid. But when van der Mark and Gerloff are challenging for top 5, top 6 spots, that's when Redding finds himself a little bit on the back foot there on row row number 5. Alongside him, Axel Bassani and Dominic Egerter. Bassani still top independent, 240 points compared to 195 for Danilo Petrucci. Low scoring for Bassani since the news really came out that he would be moving to Kawasaki. Danilo Petrucci, though, hasn't been able to take advantage. He's been struggling too.
Yeah, it's been a weekend where you certainly would have expected a lot more from the likes of Bassani on that Ducati. It just hasn't worked for him this week. But since the news started to break about him leaving Moto Corsa, leaving Ducati and going to Kawasaki, it's definitely been one of those things where we've seen that downturn in performance.
Dominic Egerter completes row number 5. He's been struggling with injury, two surgeries during the summer to try and get himself back to fitness, but it doesn't look like he's back fully fit at very least. 2 14th places this weekend so far, 2 points for him in race 1, and what a shame because his teammate Remy Gardner has been going so well, and they've had reverse fortunes really over the course of this 2023. Safety car is pulling away, 5 minutes till we get underway. Let's go back down to the grid with Dave.
Yes, I'm down at Yamaha. We've heard the Ducati side of things. I'm with Toprak Razgatlioglu's crew chief Phil Marron. Phil, we saw how frustrated, how angry Toprak was at the end of that Super Pole race after that close finish. Is he going to channel that aggression into this race? He knows what he's got to do.
From race 1 and Super Pole race, we couldn't have honestly asked for any more from Toprak, so we just have to ask for the same again. Just hope we've got some tyre towards the end of the race. Try our best.
That's all we can do. Best of luck for the race. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
That's the reality for Toprak Razgatlioglu. All he can do is give it his everything and hope that Alvaro Bautista somehow comes unstuck. It wouldn't be the first time. He led in Italy when he crashed out in race 2, and of course he led in Aragon as well and looked to have that race 1 of the Aragon round fairly comfortably in his pocket. He's had 4 race victories since then. There they are. The lead 2 in the championship standings, Alvaro Bautista and Toprak Razgatlioglu. 55 points is the gap. And if it's another 7 gained here, it will be 62. That's the points haul that's available at the final round. And if we did have a tie after these 4 remaining races, it would go back to the largest number of race victories in feature-length races. And it's Alvaro Bautista who comfortably has the edge there. The difference between the 2 of them, and the reason why Bautista hasn't already got this over the line, is the number of incidents that he has suffered this season. Not quite as consistent with those podiums as he was a year ago. 31 podiums out of 36 races for Bautista. Last season, Toprak has only twice been off the podium in 2023. So it's Bautista versus Razgatlioglu. A 1-3 for Bautista, and Toprak would decide the title before Jerez in 4 weeks' time. 2 wins out of 2 for Alvaro Bautista in Portimao. If he completes the hat-trick here with Toprak Razgatlioglu at best 3rd, he will be champion with a round to spare. But Toprak has recorded 2 second places